When I was a student, I was a very adventurous traveller. And when I was very young, I found myself travelling in South America, and I was travelling in the Amazon, and stumbled across Werner Herzog and his gang and Klaus Kinski making Fitzcarraldo. And as anyone who knows anything about the making of that film, or who saw Les Blanc's Burden of Dreams, will know it was a very kind of explosive, contentious set and group of people. And so a kind of young 20-year-old stumbling across this group who happened to speak most of the languages that people spoke, I was kind of sucked in very readily and got involved with them and would go off every morning at sunrise on the steamship, the Molhaída, going up and down the Amazon. I wasn't there for the bit when they were taking it over the mountain, I hasten to add. And it was just the most extraordinary experience, as you can imagine. And I looked around and I just thought, well, I couldn't do what that person's doing, but why couldn't I do what that other person is doing? And I was actually on a sabbatical year from university, so the idea got planted there and then that's what I wanted to do. I have to say that when I finished my university and when I did start working as an assistant to someone else's assistant, in a studio making a very, very prosaic film as far removed from Fitzcarraldo as could possibly be imagined. It was a very, very different experience indeed, but it certainly set me on that course. Well, the path was a bit of an unfocused one, I would say. I didn't really have any idea of which way I was headed, but working in the studio, I could see that to go through the whole production system was and at that point it was very heavily unionized as well, that was a very, very long path indeed. And then by chance, someone had to carry a promo reel to a film market. And as I was the most dispensable person working on the production, I was sent off to do this very important job. And I think they thought I would be quicker than FedEx or something. I'm not quite sure the thinking behind it. And when I got there, I was kind of introduced to this world of buying and selling film rights. And because I speak a lot of languages, I made myself useful to the person who was doing that job on that film. And he kept me there. And then I started, when he went on to do something else, I worked with him. And it was interesting because it was just completely fortuitous that I even discovered that such a world existed. But I did discover that speaking languages was not essential but a big bonus. And I think the combination of business, negotiating deals, but also creativity and knowing how to pitch something and actually understanding films well enough that when you're talking to a distributor who in many cases are very film literate, sophisticated people, that if you can talk that language, it's very helpful, especially when we started producing our own films and we were putting films together and we would have relationships with distributors where in effect they became our partners. You really needed to have a kind of proper knowledge about film and as well as the marketplace. And for me, that combination of skills of understanding film, the creative side, scripts, all of that, and editing, obviously, which we used to have to become very involved in at times, but also understanding the marketplace and knowing how to structure a deal and forming those close relationships with people. It was an interesting combination of skills and one that I, felt comfortable and something I felt comfortable with. But as I say, very, very fortuitous, because I didn't really know that such an activity existed until I just fell into it. So I wouldn't say it was a kind of focused, targeted trajectory. It was just stumbling into one thing after another. I'd been involved in sales and distribution and marketing of films for a few years. I handled a lot of Stephen Frears' early films and Mike Figgis's first film, and I got to the point when I wanted to do something different. And I was introduced to my partner, Sharon Harrell, by my very good friend, Jeremy Thomas, a producer. And Sharon had been a producer in Israel and New York for many years. And we met on a bit of a blind date in the Heels Cafe on Tottenham Court Road. And we hit it off straight away. And the really important thing between us is that we had very, very complementary experience. And Sharon, having had her production experience, really wanted to become more involved in the part of the industry where you control the distribution rights, which is really at the kind of crux of it all. And so we decided to set the company up together. And when we did so, she had her experience in production and on the banking side, and myself in the sales and the distribution and marketing. And we kind of, covered the whole kind of range of expertise that one needed. And when we set it up, we were just at the tail end of the video boom and being able to finance films by pre-selling the rights, really by making a film for the value of the distribution rights, or hopefully a little bit less. And since then it's become rather more complicated than that. And we made these kind of action films. We used to pre-sell the rights and made the films for whatever we could raise. But as I say, it was a tail end of that. And at the same time, we picked up various rather esoteric films from film festivals along the way. And whenever any of the trade journals used to write about us, it was always with the adjective eclectic. And then it's like, how does one get rid of that word eclectic? How do we make something which is more homogenous and kind of more coherent, really? And the turning point for us was when we did Death and the Maiden, the Roman Polanski film. And that for us was a kind of more high-profile film which had a strong commercial value because there are a lot of distributors, a lot of territories that are great supporters and fans of Roman's work. But it was obviously of a more literary nature. It was based on the Ariel Dorfman play. And that was a big turning point for us. And from that point onwards, we went very much in that direction and became quite well known for kind of high-profile, kind of classy, often literary adaptations, although we often did a few horror movies and genre movies along the way, but that's what we became known for. And that was also the point where our very brilliant lawyer, who'd been our lawyer from the beginning, Hannah Leader, became our third partner. And yes, Capital Films then became a company of 3 women. In the course of making Death and the Maiden with Roman Polanski, we became very close friends with Sam Cohen, the legendary New York agent. Became a very, very close personal friend and became really a bit of a godfather to the company. And Sam called me one day and said I had to help him out, that his very close friend and client, Robert Altman, was preparing a film and the financiers had pulled out. And because Rob had put a lot of his own money in during the pre-production process, he was about to go bankrupt. And we really, really had to kind of come and, bail him out and take on this film. It was an interesting moment with Altman, because although obviously he had done the most extraordinary, legendary, iconic films, he had also just come off doing a slew of really not good films, including Pret-a-Porter. There were 3 that each one had bombed, and no one would touch him, so it wasn't quite as exciting a prospect as it seemed. But we looked at the script, and the script was so strong and such a kind of unusual mix with Altman's that we thought, gosh, the combination of the two could be really, really something. So one day, Bob and Julian Fellowes came to our office and did this major pitch. Julian was, was very effective and very powerful, but I think at this point they were kind of quite desperate in the process. And we kind of got it. We saw that there was something there, the collision of these two improbable worlds as point. It's funny actually, because people say to me, "Oh, you must have known the film was going to be a success, because with that cast, how could it not be?" But actually, the biggest problem was the cast, because the star playing the role of the Hollywood producer that was eventually played rather brilliantly by Bob Balaban, who had been the kind of conceiver of the project. But when in fact that movie star dropped out, it was a bit of a kind of hairy moment. And of course, since then, first of all, obviously from a creative and quality point of view, most of the cast had come together by the time Bob came to us, so the cast was what it was. Yes, I think actors absolutely loved working with him. It's such an unusual way of working, and quite unlike anything else, yes. I don't imagine for a moment that he had difficulty getting people to work with him. This was a new setup at the Film Council with their funding in larger, more commercial films, and then they had another fund for more kind of experimental films. And Robert Jones, who was running the main fund, loved the project and came on board. He took quite a risk, Robert, because although the film was British, it was obviously very, very British, the film, it did have an American director. So to make his first major investment into a film with an American director, you could see that there was a certain amount of resistance, and I'm sure the late Alexander Walker had a thing or two to say about that. But yeah, he loved it and they came on board. They got all their money back, I think, even before the film was released, pretty much, and it was a huge success for them too. But there was a risk involved, obviously. There's no certainty in films, and he also had to kind of weather the flack of having an American director. I mean, a very iconic American director on their first investment. But the film couldn't have been funded without them. It was absolutely key. The whole question about when you know that a film is a success. And I always like to tell the story that you don't know for a very, very, very long time. So someone brings a project to you, or you develop a project, and you hope that has something there that can be a success. But you don't know, you hope. You hope that it can be more than the sum of its parts, or at least the sum of its parts. And then you make the film, and you still don't know. But in the case of Gosford Park, the not knowing whether we had a success was so drawn out as to be kind of completely ridiculous. The film opened the London Film Festival, and so it showed in that huge cinema in Leicester Square, and the entire British film industry is sitting there, and it went down like a lead balloon. Now, I have to say that Sharon and I really thought that we had something. We really thought that the film had something special and could really fly. But you don't know for sure. But we felt it was possible, which is, I think, the most one can ever say, that it's possible. There's no certainty. And then we had this screening at the Odeon Leicester Square, and it was really not good. And if I felt that in my bones, I really felt it at the after party when everyone was coming up to me and saying, "Well done, that must have been really hard to pull off. This is not what you want to hear." And in fact, a journalist friend of mine, writing for one of the trade papers, called me the next day and said, "Don't you want to know what I think?" I said, "Yeah, okay." And he said, "You've got a huge problem on your hands. No one is going to see this movie." So Sharon and I were really taken aback by all of this. Oh my God, we really thought we had something here. We really, really felt this film had something special and could work. But at that screening at the London Film Festival with the entire British film industry, they decided otherwise. It is an interesting question when you know whether you've got a success, because very late in the day in the case of this film. And interestingly as well, the film performed everywhere, in every single country imaginable except one, which was Japan. So after the huge success of Gosford Park, which was fantastic, it was fantastic for us, it was fantastic for Bob at this stage in his life, and having done some films that hadn't been so strong, and suddenly to have this massive success was absolutely fantastic. And of course fantastic for Julian Fellowes, needless to say. And after that film, we went on to do 2 more films with Bob, his last 2 films. In fact, the next film I had been a bit unsure about. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be as commercial as Gosford Park had been. Interesting film, but much, much smaller, called The Company, based on a ballet company. And I was really in 2 minds whether we should get involved or not. But we'd taken such a massive risk on Gosford Park, and now everyone wanted to work with Altman, all the distributors wanted to come on board. I thought, well, we should do it, just because we were the ones who took the risk, rather than let someone else do it and have it much easier. So we did do it, but it was a smaller film, and we did it on that basis. And then we did his film after that, Prairie Home Companion, which was a wonderful film with a great cast, including Meryl Streep, but a very, very American film. We didn't think it would be a huge film internationally, small internationally, but strong for the States. So we came on board and just handled the distribution on that. We didn't get involved in financing. But it's nice that, after Gosford Park, we did the next 2 films, his last 3 films of his life. That was rather wonderful.